Nope.
Hello, dear listener. Before we start the story, I need to give everyone a trigger warning. I don't want to spoil anything, and if I tell you what the trigger warning is, it will definitely spoil it. So if you want to risk that and read the trigger warning down below, you can check out the description. Otherwise, don't go there because you will see it and it will ruin the story. And I wish you all luck because this one gets a little rough at the end. You've been warned. Elliot was already feeling a bit of relief while packing his suitcase. It's time to get away for a while. This house holds so many emotions. Emotions that are so strong that the noise of them feels like a percussion section that has taken to playing an endless concert between his ears. It's been 7 months since his wife passed during labor, along with their unborn child. He was on the road heading toward a place called Morning Rise Nature Resort. From what he'd been told, this resort seemed like a great place for Elliot to clear his mind, plus he greatly enjoyed hiking. He had heard about this place from Mark, who was the OBGYN that Elliot's wife saw. Mark was a very empathetic source of comfort, and he has even become somewhat of a friend to Elliot. But Elliot was alone on this trip. He was never a very social guy. In fact, he had very few friends. His wife was really the only person he enjoyed spending lots of time with. So, without her, he spent much of his time alone. When he arrived, Elliot was struck by the size and beauty of the resort. The road weaved around the hills. The trees are massive, and the buildings are rustic yet modern. It appeared to be a very secluded spot, and he was excited to get out on the trail. But as he pulled up to the main hotel building to check into his room, he became a bit annoyed and surprised at the amount of other people there. Elliot traversed the loud and busy parking lot, with the sense that every car had the intent of making him into roadkill. He survived the noise of the outside just to enter into a mess of booming noises and bodies bumping into him in the overcrowded lobby. "What the hell is going on?" he muttered grumpily to himself. Then he saw it. A giant banner above the entrance to a large conference room read, "Morning Rise Grief and Healing Convention." He began to try and navigate his way the hell out of there, but before he could, he heard a familiar voice yell out, "Elliot, you made it. Before you say anything, I'm sorry. I knew you wouldn't come if I told you, but it'll be good for you." It was Mark. Elliot went up to his room, irritated by how Mark overstepped his bounds. But he knew Mark meant well, so he decided to make the best of it. He put his stuff down and went out to go on a hiking trail. But as soon as he opened his door, there was Mark, waiting for him. "Oh, hey, Mark, look, I know you think these grief therapy things will help me, but really, I'm fine. I think I'll go for a hike, take a look around, and I'll catch up with you. There will be plenty of time for hiking later. We're all meeting in the conference room. Let's go. Also, it's not therapy, Elliot. It's just a bunch of people who understand." Elliot stood next to Mark in the conference room. There was someone speaking on stage, but all Elliot could hear was a deafening ringing sound in his ears. People were applauding, laughing, and smiling. An awful lot of smiling for a grief thing, Elliot thought. Mark, with a big grin on his face, kept glancing over at Elliot, and Elliot did not know how to respond. Next, they broke off into smaller groups. The leader of the group that Elliot and Mark were in asked if this convention was anyone's first attempt at reaching out and if they would like to share. Elliot immediately put his head down, but Mark kept nudging him until the group leader noticed.
"Would you like to share?"
said the group leader in a soft voice while staring at Elliot without so much as blinking. How could you do this, Mark? Thought Elliot. Elliot looked down. He was beet red, and his words came out so low they were almost unintelligible. It was so bad the group leader cut in.
"I'm sorry, but we cannot hear you. Can you speak up?"
But Elliot just froze. Then the leader said in a comforting voice,
"It's okay. You can always share later, Elliot."
Embarrassed and furious, Elliot got up and stormed down the hallway. He went into a restroom and slammed the door. Then, standing in front of the sink staring into the mirror, Elliot realized something. He never said his name to the group or to any of these people. Mark burst into the restroom, apologizing so profusely that Elliot felt it would be wrong for him to show his true feelings, even though he was still mad on the inside. It was an annoying feeling. Mark promised the rest of the convention wouldn't be like that. Elliot and Mark rejoined the convention. The next part seemed very odd to Elliot. This is basically arts and crafts, he thought to himself. They got into small groups and worked on a project, some kind of team-building bullshit. Elliot's group was building a chair, while another group was making some kind of table stand. One group was making flutes, and another was sewing some kind of small robe or something. None of it made any sense to Elliot. He just kept thinking, how was any of this related to grieving? As they worked, Elliot felt a sharp object hit his back, penetrating his skin. It sliced across him, and out of the corner of his eye, he saw a man quickly walk past with a knife. Elliot yelled out in pain, but the man did not stop. "Mark, I think he cut me on purpose," Elliot said in a quiet voice. "No, that couldn't be. Besides, it's just a tiny cut anyway," he said, laughing it off. As Elliot looked around the room, he noticed several people staring intensely at his back where he was cut. Elliot felt so uneasy and not in control of his getaway at all like he planned. In fact, he realized he hadn't gotten outside at all, which he thought was the whole point of a nature resort. But he was relieved that the day was over, and he was finally alone in his room. His back was worse than Mark had said, and he had actually bled through his shirt, but was too tired to worry about it. He crashed and fell asleep almost immediately. The next morning, Elliot woke up early and got all his stuff together before heading out. He went through the halls as quietly as he could. He made it up to the desk in the lobby and whispered that he was checking out. But the woman at the desk informed him that his group was waiting for him in the conference room. "Waiting? That makes no sense," said Elliot. Then Mark stepped out. "Elliot, it's time for you to join us for breakfast," he said in a serious yet calm tone. Without a thought, Elliot rushed toward the hotel doors, but they were locked. He banged on them several times. "Mark, I don't know what's going on, but I'm leaving." Mark just stood there with a smile. Elliot exclaimed as if Mark didn't hear him. "I'm leaving, Mark!" Then he turned to the woman at the desk. Let me out. You have to let me out." With a worrisome look, she quietly said,
"I'm sorry, Elliot."
Out of nowhere, Elliot was grabbed from both sides and dragged into the large room. He was sat on the large chair they made the day before. He was in the middle of the room, crowds on either side of him, with an aisle leading toward the stage in front. Before him was a small table. Elliot stopped fighting for a second, and in a confused state, he nervously glanced around the room. He realized Mark had disappeared. "Mark, where are you? What is this?" he yelled. Then Elliot heard the sound of flutes playing and what sounded like crying. Mark came out onto the stage, holding an infant clothed in a robe. "Elliot, do you know who this is?" said Mark in a playful tone. The room filled with giddy giggling, and all eyes turned from the stage to Elliot. The sight of their grinning faces made Elliot's stomach do backflips. He knew it was his son. He just knew, but his mind wouldn't accept it. "It can't be. It can't be," he quietly stammered over and over again. "Elliot, I think you know who this is and why we are here." Mark's tone was becoming more serious. "This is the source of your pain, but today it will become..." Mark paused and sternly looked at one of the men in the crowd, who was laughing uncontrollably and seemed as though he couldn't contain himself. Suddenly, the man jumped out of his seat and began to scream, "Breakfast! Breakfast! Breakfast!" The man was grabbed by the others, who began dragging him from the room. The man began sobbing. "No, no, no, please," he begged. Instinctually, like a surge of lightning, Elliot used the distraction to shove the table at one of the men at his side and run toward the stage. He dove onto the stage, charging Mark, and grabbed the child. They scuffled, trying to pull the crying baby from each other's arms, until finally, Elliot had his son. But as Elliot turned to flee, he was completely surrounded. The members of the convention pulled the baby away as Elliot wept. "No! Please! No, you can't!" They fought with each other over the child at first, before turning their attention to Elliot. One by one, they began to stab him as he reached out desperately, pleading for his son. In all the commotion, Mark just walked right out, unlocked the front door, got in his car, and shook his head. With a disappointing sigh, he said to himself, "Whew, this year really got out of control." Thank you for listening, and I hope you enjoyed this week's story. If you did, you know what to do. Take that like button and just, well, you know what? I'm not going to make any jokes. This one was a rough one, and I warned you in the beginning, so if you're pissed right now, you can only blame yourself. Well, not just yourself. You can also blame the author of this story. Shout out to Ethan Luce. I think I'm pronouncing that correctly. I hope it's not Luke, but I think it's Ethan Luce, otherwise known as Illegitimate Earpiece on Reddit, for writing the story and giving me the permission to narrate it. Guys, I personally prefer a happier ending than this, but listen, if you're feeling emotional or angry, it's better than feeling nothing at all. Am I right? Again, don't take it up with me. I am simply the storyteller, not the story writer, and I'm not the one responsible for eating a baby. But you know what? I ain't even mad at you, Ethan. I ain't even mad at you. You went there, and I respect it. Until next time, everybody, remember to stay safe out there, and don't go to any weird conventions in the middle of nowhere. I'll be seeing you in the next video.